Hello, and welcome to our podcast,
Sisters, Not Wives.
I'm your host, Kinsley Hatch.
And I'm Jocelyn Hatch.
Today, I titled this podcast episode The Power Vacuum because we are jumping to when Joseph Smith died and what happened after that.
Oh, I was wondering when we were going to get to this.
Yes, we are here. Today's the day. I wanted to start out with a quote that I love when it comes to history. The victor will always be the judge and the vanquished the accused. Tell me your thoughts on that quote.
Say it one more time.
The victor will always be the judge and the vanquished the accused.
I mean, to me, that sounds like the people who win or the last one standing in the story are usually the ones that write the story.
Exactly.
It's really frustrating. That's always really bothered me about history.
I know. It's really messed up.
Because it's like, dang, who do we know who was right?
Right. And I feel like
we have these narratives, but...
And the thing is, with history, it feels like it's so, like set in stone. Like, this happened, this happened, this happened, because that's how we learn history, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's crazy because that's not actually the reality. Like, it's funny how we can kind of superimpose that on the past and think that life was that way. When today things are so messy and 100% not that way. Things aren't black and white. Things aren't whitewashed. There's not just a good side and a bad side. But in our brains, because we're learning about it as like a subject matter, it's easier to be like, oh yeah, that is how it was. Mm-hmm. It makes it simpler for us to understand, you know?
Yeah.
But I love that. And also just like the evolution of history and the evolution of our society. I feel like 10, 20 years ago, that kind of was the narrative, you know, like it was. And you see this throughout history, like with the British Empire and colonizing Africa. Like now we know they did some crazy stuff and colonization in and of itself was pretty horrible. But years ago, decades ago, the story was about these triumphant Europeans who colonized these barbarians or whatever horrible, like, term you want to call them by, but that was the narrative. Like even with America and Manifest Destiny and like, oh yeah, let's go to let's expand the West and let's like do these things. And we saw all the good side of those because there is good in it. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the times it took a while to be like, oh, who suffered from that? The Native Americans. And back then the narrative was so much more simpler of oh, well, they were just savages and they, you know, like that's just the trend, whether that's the British Empire with Africa or like the Qin dynasty in China or America and the West. Like it's just, and the reason why is because when you're the power who dominated, you have all the resources to craft the narrative how you want it to. And it's much easier to stifle the voices of the people you conquered. Yeah. So that just naturally happens. But the good news is I feel like now that the world is more globalized and now that it's the age of information, we've seen such a shift in that where people are realizing that things aren't just whitewashed, things aren't just good and bad, there's not just like the good people and the villains in a story that was traditionally crafted that way, and that it's way more nuanced, way more complex. And honestly, it's awesome because we're getting this like richness of information from stories that had previously been stifled of women, of like religious minorities, racial minorities, cultural minorities. All this, it's kind of a exciting time because all this is coming to the top now that had previously been buried. But I just think that's always important to know. And and it's not like it's over. It's not like people who dominate will stop crafting the narrative. Like that's still happening nowadays and will continue to happen. But the good news is we just have so many more resources to find the minority voices.
So much more access to different perspectives.
Yes, 100%. And it's not so easy to control information as it was back then, which is awesome. So I wanted to talk about that first just because I feel like that's exactly what relates to what we're going to talk about. Mm-hmm. Joseph Smith's martyrdom, I feel like pretty much everyone in the church knows about Joseph Smith's martyrdom. That's like you know about the first vision, you know he was killed, and along with that, you know that Brigham Young was the second prophet who took over after the church, and like everyone knows, it's because he like had the priesthood keys, all the priesthood keys to lead, and he was like given that, and like it's pretty step one, step two, like Joseph Smith was a prophet, he died, Brigham Young took over, and we needed Brigham Young to take over to continue what Joseph Smith had started. Like that's a pretty well accepted, well known part in history, and I feel like especially growing up in the church. I mean, did you really ever question that when you were in the church?
No, I don't think so. I think the only other thing that you've ever heard was just kind of like, oh, the dynamic between him and Emma, and like, oh, she didn't want to come with him, and blah blah blah. There's some
Right.
little
Yeah, I feel like what I always heard was that like Brigham Young was the rightful one to lead the church because Emma Smith wanted it to be like a line of royalty where she wanted her son to take over and she wanted it to be like a family thing. And obviously that's wrong because God isn't a believer in kings, and that's not how he wanted his church to be established. So Emma was wrong, but she felt that way and she stayed back in Nauvoo, and then Brigham Young took over and led everyone to Utah. Like that's what I remember.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's pretty much the gist of it that we're told in Sunday school. But in 1844, that was not how things were. Things were not that simple. And it's very interesting. So there is actually, back then, it was not only just like a big question mark of who God ordained to be the next leader of the church after Joseph Smith, but it was also tied in with that was where was the church going? What direction was it going to take? Because there was a lot of people at odds with each other. And also, Joseph Smith was like the foundation. The first vision and the Book of Mormon, that's where everyone became converted, was based off of those things. And so pretty much everyone in the church at that time like loved and trusted Joseph Smith, and that didn't necessarily translate to anyone else. And so it was definitely like big shoes to fill. And the fact that Joseph Smith was, like, regardless if you think he was like a, whatever you think he is, not a prophet, but like even a con artist or whatever, like historically you cannot deny that he was a one-of-a-kind leader who was charismatic and was able to move people in a way no one else could at the time. And he created a modern American religious movement that a bunch of people were trying at that time, but he was the one to do it. So he was, even if you want to think of him as like a bad leader, you can't deny that he was an influential leader.
Nope, yeah, so, the proof was right there.
Yeah, like literally considering everything that people were willing to do for the religion. And so because of that, also, it's like, it's hard to replace a naturally charismatic leader like that, like the origin and the founder of it. So that was another thing too, is this was just like trying to get people on your side after trying to replace someone like that, you know?
Yeah.
So
really interesting to think of, like, just like the perspective that we have of who Brigham Young was as a person too.
What do you mean?
I don't know. It just seems like he's a pretty brash, pretty aggressive type of guy.
Right.
And definitely, I never met the guy, but
you haven't?
No.
Weird.
I just definitely get the vibe that he's not the same kind of charismatic leader.
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting. Brigham Young, because Joseph Smith was killed in 1844, we have so much of him because he was the founder, but Brigham Young lived till he was in his 70s. And so we have so much more about what people thought of them. And he definitely was not, he had different things that Joseph Smith didn't have. Like, I think Brigham Young was better at creating a structure and a hierarchy than Joseph Smith was, and he was good at establishing.
Probably a little more organized.
Yeah, because Joseph Smith always kind of struggled with that kind of stuff, with money and he was always bailing people out, like all these kind of things he struggled with and led to problems in the church. And Brigham Young kind of reversed that in a lot of ways when he took over, but it was also at the compromise of a couple things that Joseph Smith wouldn't have compromised. You know, just like very different people. So it's interesting that Brigham Young's the one who replaced him. But
I want to know Brigham Young's zodiac sign.
I bet he's a Leo or a Taurus. That's what I would guess.
A Virgo or a Taurus.
Oh, look it up.
Did you pause? Oh, you're looking it up?
Okay. Jada will tell us. Okay, you let us know. But so that narrative growing up was never questioned in my circle, and I don't think in many people's circle in the church. I did hear things where people were like, Brigham Young was racist, or Brigham Young did this or that. Go. What's the sign?
Gemini.
Oh,
Gemini.
Oh my gosh, I can actually see
say.
that. Yeah, that's the biggest thing about that they're double-sided, which is very interesting with Brigham Young.
Mm-hmm.
Makes a lot of sense. But what was I saying?
Sorry.
No. We needed to know his side. We couldn't move on without that.
Can't be from female perspectives without needing to know the zodiac.
Exactly. What is this podcast even for? But okay. So I had a really big question. If anything, it was just like, like you heard character questions like, did Joseph Smith marry a 14-year-old, or was Brigham Young a racist? But it was never like a question about the transition of. It was more questioning like, are they prophets at all? Instead of like, what did Brigham Young rightfully take on the prophet role? So. But what's so interesting is a lot of people have been looking at that kind of with the whole polygamy thing, where people are looking into that and questioning that more. Now people are doing that with Brigham Young taking over for the church.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot more questions and a lot more debate going on. And so last year, there was a movie that came out called 6 Days in August, which detailed the 6 days in August, after Joseph Smith had been killed in June in 1844, leading up to Brigham Young becoming the leader of the church.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear about that movie last year?
No. Did you watch it?
Yeah, and you're not alone, because I went to the movie theaters when it was released. It was me and 3.5 old people. I say half because one guy was sleeping the whole time, so I don't think he got a lot from it.
It wasn't like half of a person.
No. That's not a thing, okay? Everyone's a person, but
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, just as an audience member, I don't think he quite retained anything there because he was getting his nap time in. But literally, it was like me and only older people.
Interesting.
And so,
why don't you invite me? Dang it!
I mean, it was like on a random night. I think I told you about it, but it was kind of like,
I'm gonna go do this.
Yeah. I literally went to the movie theater by myself, and then anyway, so yeah, you're not alone if you never heard of it because no one else has. But it follows the traditional narrative and like in a story form of how the 12 apostles and Brigham Young took over the church, and it really like pits them against who was also trying to get into the church. And so the traditional narrative goes, which the movie also follows, that before Joseph Smith died, he endowed the 12 apostles with all the priesthood keys necessary to lead the church. And he told them that that's what he was doing. So this is from a general conference talk entitled "The Keys That Never Rust," kind of explaining that. It says, prior to the martyrdom, no doubt with a sense of foreboding, the prophet Joseph prepared for his death. President Joseph Fielding Smith, which was his nephew, states, the prophet declared that he knew not why, but the Lord commanded him to endow the 12 with these keys and priesthood, and after it was done, he rejoiced very much, saying in substance, now if they kill me, you have all the keys and all the ordinances, and you can confer them upon others, and the powers of Satan will not be able to tear down the kingdom as fast as you will be able to build it up. And upon your shoulders will the responsibility of leading this people rest. Another source records Joseph counseling the people, saying, I will give you a key that will never rust. If you will stay with the majority of the 12 apostles and the records of the church, you will never be led astray. And I feel like that last phrase is like a common thing said in the church that you hear all the time, like the church will never be led astray.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you heard that growing up ever?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's kind of like one of the big bases of the church is it's the one and only true church, and it can never be led astray again because the gospel was restored and we have the keys of the priesthood now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's and that's kind of where that phrase comes from, is them talking about this.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting to see that origin. And this was essentially Brigham Young's claim to power, with the other 12 apostles backing him up, and what they were saying against other people who were trying to claim leadership in the power vacuum. What stories or people, if any, do you remember of who were trying to become president or become the prophet of the church or become the leaders after Joseph Smith? Do you remember anything?
I just remember like we just talked about, Emma Smith wanting it to be passed down through her family.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I remember, did you say that it was Oliver Cowdery?
Close, Sidney Rigdon.
I always mix those two guys up.
I know. I mean, it's hard to keep them straight. There's a lot of people.
Yeah,
but
you're talking about that one. But other than that, I don't really know too much. So please tell me.
Yeah. So it was basically that. It was Sidney Rigdon, and who Sidney Rigdon was. I think that's why it's so easy to mix it up. It's like, who are these people again? So Sidney Rigdon was the only surviving member of the first presidency because it was Hyrum Smith, Joseph Smith, and Sidney Rigdon who formed the first presidency at the time. And like I mentioned earlier, Joseph Smith was running for president of the United States. He was campaigning to be president of the United States at the time he died.
About that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was going on. So a lot of the 12 of the apostles were in the East Coast at the time he was killed, helping with the campaign. And Sidney Rigdon was his running mate. So he would have been his vice president if he got elected. And so Sidney Rigdon was like, well, I'm the last member of the first presidency, so it should probably be me.
Obviously.
Yeah, and he also was just like an OG saint. He had been there from the beginning.
He was the translator, right?
No, Oliver Cowdery was.
Oh my gosh.
It's easy to mix them up. But no, he was the one who was like mobbed and tarred and feathered at the same time that Joseph Smith was, and he's the one who like got his head when they were attacking him.
Oliver Cowdery was the one that like supposedly lost the part of the translated?
No, that was Martin Harris.
Oh my gosh. Never mind. I'm just
No, you're good. I mean, that's how everyone feels. It's hard to keep it all straight.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Martin Harris and Oliver Cowdery. Oliver Cowdery was helping scribe for Joseph Smith for the Book of Mormon. So it was at the same time. And Martin Harris helped a little as well. And then he was like, I want the 116 pages of what they had transcribed up to that point to show his wife and his wife's family so they would believe him. And Joseph Smith was like, I don't know about that. And then, yeah, you know the whole story. So that was Martin Harris. But Oliver Cowdery was the one who really helped between, like, when Emma got sick because she was pregnant, he helped Joseph Smith translate the rest of the Book of Mormon.
Okay.
And so, and he's the one who got excommunicated that we talked about.
That's right.
Right. So a while ago. So that's him. But Sidney Rigdon was like an OG leader. He's the one who was like a pastor and left his congregation for Mormonism. And so he was the leader and he was a part of the first presidency. And so he was like, okay, it should be me, but I am not claiming that I'm going to be a prophet. I just think we need a guardian of the church and like a guardian of Joseph Smith's legacy. And that's what I want to be for the church. So that was his kind of claim. And then there was another man, William Marks, who was the president of the Nauvoo Stake and also the president of the High Council, who Emma Smith kind of favored more because so what her claim was that Joseph Smith had given several blessings to their oldest son, Joseph Smith III, prophesying that he would be the next prophet. And so that's what Emma Smith believed. But Joseph Smith III was like 11 years old when his dad died. And so they needed someone to take over the church until he could eventually grow up and be the prophet. And so she was really close with William Marks. Like William Marks helped dress Joseph's body for burial when their bodies were taken back, and they had a very close relationship with the Smiths. And so that's who Emma supported. But he eventually tossed he just basically decided to join forces with Sidney Rigdon and support him instead of trying to do it himself. But before that all happened, when the apostles were still in the East Coast trying to get to Nauvoo because this whole secession crisis was going on, William Marks literally almost got elected to be, like, the people almost chose him to lead the church.
Wow.
But then Willard Richards, which was Brigham Young's cousin, was there. And he's like, no, we have to wait for the apostles before we do anything. And so it's crazy because no one really knows about William Marks. But he literally was almost the next prophet.
Wow.
But Willard Richards put a stop to it until all the apostles could come. And then Brigham Young took over. And Brigham Young
just snatched it.
Yeah. And so now everyone knows Brigham Young and no one knows William Marks. But kind of the crazy thing was, and maybe you'll remember this as we talk about it, but so Brigham Young had a meeting where he spoke in front of everyone, and they said it was like a huge spiritual experience because they said suddenly for a second while he was talking, like he took on the mantle of the prophet and the mantle of Joseph Smith, and he talked, it sounded like it was Joseph Smith's voice coming from Brigham Young, and the words he was saying and his mannerisms, like he even looked like Joseph Smith for a second. So all these people who witnessed this was like a spiritual experience, like testifying that Brigham Young should be the next prophet. And so that was another thing that got him when he was talking about how Joseph Smith gave them the keys and the 12 apostles the keys. So that was another thing that got people to be by his side. And then and with, like, the secession crisis was really, a lot of these people had to, because they were not as influential and charismatic as Joseph Smith had been, they really had to have both of everyone had to claim, like, oh, in like personal relation, I was closer to Joseph Smith, and also in my doctrines I'm promoting, that's what Joseph Smith cared about. And so that was kind of the dialogue going on.
I was his best friend.
I was his best friend. And like, Joseph Smith cared the most about this. No, Joseph Smith cared the most about this, because none of these people could stand by themselves and be fully accepted by the followers, you know? So there's a lot of that going on, and that's why Brigham Young either mimicking Joseph Smith or having a spiritual experience where he was speaking with the voice of Joseph Smith, that's what really got people.
I just keep thinking the illusionist. He came and did something crazy to make himself look like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a lot of people who don't believe in that story spiritually think. Like, Brigham Young was smart in certain ways, and a lot of people who think he was kind of a manipulator. And he was like, and it was kind of a genius move. Like, if I can mimic Joseph Smith, then I can get people to believe I should be the next prophet. So that's what people think who don't believe that it was a spiritual experience.
Also, I'm just going to say this. We're not, like, diving too much into, like, Joseph Smith's actual death. Just more of the aftermath.
I feel like
they talked about.
Yeah.
But I still want to hear people's theories about what actually happened, how he actually died. Because I got some theories.
Oh, really?
I mean, unsubstantiated, obviously. I'm not going to voice any of them because...
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that's the thing. I didn't want to go into the actual details of it, because I feel like every LDS person knows, like, we've all gone to the Joseph Smith Memorial Building and seen the little, like, clip of his life, and it goes into the mob and how he got killed and all of that. And nothing is... Like, with polygamy, there's so much more history and so much more evidence that we can dive into, whereas a lot of the times with his death, it's only speculation and only you can only, like, not fully founded, you know? You can't. But I'm down to talk about it, because I think it's fascinating.
I just think it'd be for funsies, you know?
We should talk about it sometime, because I would love to hear your theories.
Okay. So that's
and
fine.
I have my own theories, too, about some things that were interesting. Yeah, we can talk about that more if people want to hear what we think about that. But another big thing is William Marks and Sidney Rigdon were both opposed to polygamy, and obviously so was Emma. And Brigham Young and the 12 Apostles had already been practicing polygamy and had plural wives, right? And so and polygamy was a huge part of this whole thing that was happening with the secession crisis and who would take over after Joseph Smith, because even before Joseph Smith died, things were heating up with polygamy. Like, that's why he went to jail, and that's why he was put in a situation where he could get killed, is because this printing press in Nauvoo, the Nauvoo Expositor, started printing that Joseph Smith was teaching people in the church to practice polygamy secretly, and they were lying about it. And then the Nauvoo City Council and Joseph Smith voted that it was a public nuisance and had it destroyed. And that was the charge that Joseph Smith got arrested for and sent him to jail. And so it was all around polygamy. This wasn't just like a side thing. So in polygamy, you have all these people outside of the church who are like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, you know? And so people like the Nauvoo people, or not Nauvoo, but the Illinois people were at first so friendly to the Mormons because they felt bad, the fact that they were refugees and they had been mistreated so poorly in Missouri. The Illinois people were very welcoming and hospitable to the Mormons. But as like power rose and a lot of things happened and the polygamy thing started happening, everyone was like, okay, weirdos, what the F? And so hostilities were rising against them from the outside. But then in the inside, the church was also like, what the heck is happening? Because whether you believe that Joseph Smith was practicing polygamy or he wasn't practicing polygamy, people were practicing polygamy, and there was secrets going on and rumors going on, and no one knew what was going on, because before Joseph Smith died, him and Hyrum and Emma and the Relief Society, like all these people were saying like, nope, not happening. We do not believe in it. If anyone is practicing it, they're wrong. Do not believe them. We're trying to get those people to stop, figure out who it is and stop it. So they're getting all this rhetoric, while at the same time, people are going around secretly being like, no, actually it's okay. And there are literally plural wives happening. And there are members of the 12 apostles who do have plural wives at this time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like whether you would believe if Joseph Smith had plural wives this time, or if he did it, so there's all these things that even internally the church is confused about, and the people are like, what is happening? And the leaders, that's a big part of who's going to lead them is polygamy going to be allowed in the church, and what's going to be the course of that.
Yeah.
So polygamy is a big central issue of this, and you see a lot of things that happen once Brigham Young. So once Brigham Young realizes that he has the backing of most of the people, he gets to work. And there's a couple of things that are important to him. So number one, he emphasizes the need to finish building the Nauvoo Temple. The Nauvoo Temple was like in process of being built, but not complete yet. And so that's a really big one. So people can make their covenants before they leave. And so he puts a lot of emphasis on that. And then he also puts a lot of emphasis on figuring out where they're going to go next, because all the hostilities are rising on the outside. They're like, and freaking their prophet, like the other brother of the prophet just got killed. They're like, okay, well, yeah. They just see the writing on the wall, right? And they're like, okay, we're going to get kicked out again. We're going to be refugees again. And this time, like there had been talk of this previously before his death, but even after Joseph Smith's death, now they're like, really like, we need to find somewhere outside of the United States to settle.
Mm-hmm.
Because the government, every time we get run out, the government does not have our back. We can't practice our religion the way we want to, and we're sick of this happening. We need to find like a final place for us where we could be isolated and alone and to practice our religion in peace. And so Brigham Young sends out scouts to the West to try to find a place that will be suitable for them to lead the saints to. And as we all know, that became Utah. So he starts that process, and it takes time, obviously, because they have to trek out there and explore and try to find. So he starts
and not die.
And not die, like make the perilous journey of getting out there, finding a good place, getting back and telling them that. So yeah, that's a whole process. It's not just, oh, they knew they were going to Utah. I was like, no, this was a whole thing, and everything was up in the air at this point. Like, is there even a place that could be a good place for us out there? And so he starts that process. Scouts get sent out. And then there were the internal dealings of the church. So Joseph had been named trustee of the church, which meant he had taken on many assets, including like a bunch of land deeds, buildings, steamboats, you name it. So there's a lot of assets, but there was also a lot of debt connected, and it was really murky about what was Joseph Smith's personal property and personal debt versus what belonged to the church and what debt the church had. And so now that he was dead, there was that needed to be sorted out as well. And I almost want to show a clip, maybe I will, like in the video later, of how that movie portrays Emma Smith and Lucy Mack Smith versus these men who are trying to figure out what to do financially with the church. Because frankly, it's a little condescending. But those were the people who were at battle, was Emma Smith, who, by the way, was 4 months pregnant when Joseph Smith died. So she's pregnant.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So sad.
Mm-hmm. And so it's her versus the 12 apostles and Brigham Young, essentially, and William Clayton, people like that, who are trying to sort out the finances of the church. And what's kind of happening is it looks like the 12 are like, we'll take care of you, Emma. Of course we will. But really, it looks like they're fighting a lot, because it seems like the 12 apostles are trying to take all the assets and be like, oh, well, this belongs to the church, but all the debt, that belongs to Joseph Smith and his family. So it's like just wildly convenient that it worked out that way, right? And so they're like, oh, but we'll give you some stuff, but it's just wildly disproportioned,
right?
And so Emma Smith is like, over my dead body, you idiots. And frankly, you shouldn't even be running the church, And so her and Brigham Young do not get along. Her and William Clayton do not get along. Like, people keep trying to go to her. But the thing is, she is a force to be reckoned with. She's not some little, play sweet and nice type of woman. She's a super intelligent woman. Like, so many of her, of Joseph Smith, especially near the end where he was in so much legal trouble. People were chasing him. He was trying to figure it out. Joseph Smith was the one in hiding, and Emma Smith was the one meeting with lawyers, figuring out solutions, commanding people, like arranging meetings. And she did that like all along in the church with Joseph Smith by her side. She was involved in financial, legal, any kind of, even like doctrinally, there's so many things that came from Emma Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Such as ride or die.
What? Yeah. Yeah. They were each other's ride or die. And so the fact that now she is trying, like other people are trying to reduce her and kick her out of it. She's like, no, over my dead body, bros. And so they're fighting, especially since you're trying to pin all this debt on me, the widow of the prophet. Like,
right.
So you can take all the assets and go to Utah. Like, that's messed up.
Mm-hmm.
And I have all these children I'm supposed to be providing for. And Lucy Mack Smith, like, and literally, like, everyone freaking died. Hyrum died. Joseph died. Did we talk? We talked about Samuel Smith, who died, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, he died like a month later in July, very suspiciously.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're like, oh my gosh. And so there's this huge fighting going on about the finances of the church. And then another huge contention point was, surprise, surprise, polygamy, with Emma Smith being like, no. And other people in the church being like, I don't think so.
I'm sorry. I know this, but like part of the reason that he was arrested was because it had to do with the printing press.
Mm-hmm.
It had something to do with polygamy, right?
Yeah, well, that was what the printing press was printing about.
And then he got mad and went and
so
it down, right?
So him and the Nauvoo City Council voted that it was a public nuisance. So then they went and destroyed the printing press.
Okay.
And then he got arrested for that.
It's just crazy. It's crazy to me that people can think that polygamy was ordained by God. When it caused this many issues just in the beginning and hundreds of years later.
Mm-hmm. And during it, too. Like, I definitely want to get into the women's stories. And there are still very powerful women who were in the church, who were a part of polygamy. But, like, so many times I feel like it's smoothed over and it's like, no, they were happy. And it's like,
well, look, they're great people. They do great things.
Yeah, it's like,
it has nothing to do
with polygamy. And a lot of times it was in spite of the misery they were experiencing, you know? And so
it's more like they're survivors of polygamy. And
right, 100%. And so that's the wild thing. It's one thing to historically be like, oh, I think Joseph Smith practiced polygamy and these people practiced polygamy and I think they were still of God. That's just history. And it's an entirely other thing to be like, oh, because they practice polygamy, it must be ordained by God. And therefore polygamy is ordained by God and right. And I have to tell you, I'm in some Facebook groups that are for LDS people. And some of the things people fight about in polygamy are wild how they justify it from a spiritual sense. Mm-hmm. And it's like, why are you justifying this? This has nothing to do with like your current practice of religion.
Right.
But it's because it's the premises that it's based on. It's like, well, God will never lead the church astray. Well, a prophet can't be wrong. You know, like all these things. And so they feel like if they admit that polygamy was wrong, then all those premises are in question. And that's what they have real conviction in.
But it's just crazy to me. I just like, on the flip side, I just don't see how you could view it as being ordained by God.
Yeah. It just
like
seems... No, go ahead. Sorry.
It just literally was the biggest complication, the biggest hindrance that the church faced, like before, during, and after.
Yes. Every stage, polygamy was not helpful to the church. Mm-hmm. And when they were practicing polygamy, it was the same thing. They were telling missionaries for the longest time, being like, don't tell converts that we're practicing polygamy. Even when they were openly practicing it, like, just say we're not to the people in England and get them over here, and then they'll figure out we're practicing polygamy. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, even back then, it wasn't helping them, you know? And that's what led to a lot of their problems that, like, we're going to get into the history of Utah, which is gnarly, not the whitewashed version we've all heard. And it all stems from polygamy, all of the huge problems that happen. So it's like, why? Even if you're coming at it from trying to protect the church perspective, polygamy did not protect the church. It endangered it at every step of the way.
Yeah.
So,
and continues to give it a bad reputation.
Right. Like, I met some people from out of state in California, and they had heard about Mormons, and so we were talking about it, and they didn't even know, which was weird for me coming from my, like, growing up in a Utah perspective. Like, they didn't know that Joseph Smith had been killed. They didn't know that, but they did know about polygamy. That was the one thing they knew about the church.
That's how it is for everybody. Yeah, Mormons.
Yeah.
When they practice polygamy, or they still practice, or they used to, or whatever it is. It's like the first thought.
Yep, 100%. And And honestly, it's a tragedy because there's a lot more beautiful things in the gospel.
Yeah.
And especially for people who do believe in the gospel. It's like there's so many more things that would be better for people to know about the church.
But that's the smear on the church's name.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It literally just reminds me of the Book of Mormon where it talks about whoredoms and abominations. You know, like, I just don't see how you can justify it morally, religiously, and even just like for the good of the church.
Yeah, like logically, logistically. Like,
all of it does not make any sense.
Not when you weigh the pros and the cons.
Yeah. It really just rides on the fact that, like, well, God said it was right, which doesn't make any sense. Like, I think God makes more sense than that.
Yep.
But, and it just is always so convenient that in every single time where a ton of spiritual power gets concentrated, suddenly God tells a man that he needs to have multiple sexual partners. Like, why does that always happen over and over and over again?
Every cult.
Every cult. And I don't think I don't think Mormonism is a cult. A lot of people do think Mormonism is a cult. But I don't think but regardless, it's like that happens every single time a cult leader takes over. And that happens why is that always the case? And I think it has to do with the roots of power and specifically what some people can do with spiritual manipulation and authority. Authority is very crazy what it does to us psychologically. So, yeah. But going to polygamy, so what was happening with polygamy? Obviously, we know what the buildup was with Joseph Smith getting killed, and there's speculation. Was he practicing polygamy? Was he not? The traditional narrative says yes, he was. But some very interesting things happened right after he died with polygamy that I think is so important to know when considering if Joseph Smith practiced polygamy and what the direction of the church in general. So Brigham Young, at this point, the people who supposedly were in the inner circle taking on sacred wives had taken like one or two here and there. Everything was still hush hush. That's how the narrative goes, right? Joseph Smith dies in June 1844. Brigham Young. So, okay, sorry, let me go back a little bit. So Joseph Smith is said to have married 30 plus women, right? And the time period he started, Fanny Alger was before that in the 1830s, so not really counting that, otherwise it would be a longer period of time. But from the time he really got down to business, it was his first plural wife was considered to be Louisa Beeman on April 5th, 1841. And then his last plural wife was, interestingly, Brigham Young's sister, who was 55 at the time.
What?
Fanny Young, which was in, I think, November 1843.
He just likes some fannies.
Yeah, it's got a thing. It's his type. But, yeah, when was that? I think it was November 1843. So, roughly, his first official plural wife was Louisa in April 1841, and then he was killed June 1844. So roughly he had 3 years where he married 30 plus women, right? And that's where he was really practicing polygamy before he died. So in those 3 years, I want to kind of draw a parallel to what happened with Joseph Smith in those 3 years versus the 3 years after his death from 1844 up till Brigham Young came to Utah with the first saints on July 24th, 1847. Because it's that same time period, same three-year span with Joseph Smith and all his wives, and then the time between he was killed to them arriving in Utah. So
dang, it took him that long to get here after he died?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I don't think I realized that.
Yeah, I feel like most people don't. I think it's like, okay, then they went to Utah.
Well, I think I thought maybe it took like a year. But
yeah.
That's a handful of years.
Yeah, no, it took a long time. They still had to build a temple. They still had to do endowments. They went to winter's quarters. And they had to wait for the scouts to get back to tell them where they were going. So it was a long process, and a lot happened. And those 3 years are when these people were fighting back and forth, and so things weren't very smooth going on. And Emma was still, fighting for herself and fighting for the church that she believed in. So Brigham Young, after Joseph Smith died, they had married like a couple, like I said, but Brigham Young married 37 additional wives between the time of Joseph Smith's death in June 1844 to when he arrived in Utah, July 1847. And then Heber C. Kimball married 31 additional wives between the time of Joseph Smith's death to them being in Utah. Parley P. Pratt married 4 women in 1844 alone, starting in September. So as soon as Joseph Smith died, he was married 4 women and 8 total by 1847. Yeah.
That's wild.
I know, it's crazy. It's like, oh my gosh. They really got to it.
Busy.
Yeah. And the other members of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles did take on plural wives, but not nearly. Like, those were the people who took on a ton right away, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of times the reasons given for the gaps in evidence of Joseph Smith practicing polygamy was, oh, well, by nature it was secret, so we don't have records of it, right? And maybe if Joseph Smith had lived longer, like Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball did, we would have had evidence. So those are kind of the 2 arguments that happen a lot. Like, oh, well, maybe it's just an absence of evidence instead of, like, no evidence, right? But something that I think is... And he had to keep it secret because of Emma, and he was going to get in trouble with the law and the communities around them. Like, they had to keep it hush-hush, right? That's the reasoning for saying why there isn't more evidence of Joseph Smith practicing polygamy. Mm-hmm. But, like, let's go to I know we've already mentioned this here and there, but I think it's very important to draw a parallel to see what evidence actually happens from this. So the strongest evidence, obviously, of polygamy, what would you say for you? What would be the, like, sure sign that someone is practicing polygamy? I know, it's kind of a random question.
I don't know.
For me, I think it's if you have a kid with a plural wife. Duh, you can't dispute that, right?
Right.
More than someone saying you practice plural marriage, more than, like, other people claiming they heard things, or, like, it's like, you can't deny DNA, right?
Yeah.
Like, paternity test.
I was also thinking about it, too, like, when they're trying to be all hush-hush, like, what if somebody showed up to their house and was like, oh, there's 3 women in here, blah, blah, oh, we're just chilling. Like,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah, and there are, like, these different accounts, secondhand, thirdhand, firsthand, but they're not contemporary. But all these people, like, claiming, like, oh, I maybe saw this or I maybe saw that, but it's all in this environment of rumors and unknowns and secrecy, and so it's really hard to sift out what was real and what was not real,
Yeah.
And so, but obviously, a sure sign that you couldn't deny is if we had DNA evidence that Joseph Smith had a child from one of his plural wives, right?
Right.
And there was a lot of claims to that. There was about 11 children that were speculated that could have been from Joseph Smith from these plural wives.
And none of them turned out to be biological.
Exactly. So,
whatever.
Yep. So, all of these claims. Yeah, it is so crazy. No one knows about this. But all of them turned out negative, all the ones that were tested. And so, as we have it now, every single claim has been proved false, but we know that Joseph Smith, another stupid claim that people say is like, oh, Joseph Smith wasn't very fertile, and, like, maybe that's why...
Had a bunch of kids with Emma, didn't he?
I know, he had 9 kids with Emma.
Yeah.
But some people will claim, like, because some of Emma had a stillborn and, like, children who died in infancy and stuff, so they're like, oh, it was because Joseph Smith's genetics weren't that strong or whatever.
I mean, that was just kind of the time.
Yeah, that literally was
all the time.
It's such a reach to make that argument. It's like,
right.
You are really reaching at that point to make... There's no medical evidence to prove
don't
that.
Want to get Emma pregnant and blah, blah.
Yeah, it's like, what? That makes no sense. They had 9 children. Like, even if you are trying to say his genetic material was not the best, they conceived 9 children.
They still had.
Yeah, and, like, a handful, like, it wasn't just, like, one lived. They had a good amount who survived.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that is such a reach, and I feel like, honestly, kind of a dishonest argument to try to make. You know? It's like, okay, that's just so convenient that, oh, he had sex with all these women, like 30 plus women, but we can't prove it because he wasn't fertile, but somehow he was fertile with his own wife.
Right.
Like, literally doesn't make sense. So it annoys me when people try to claim that.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
Yeah, that is a weird one. So let's look at in the same 3 years, right? All these men married the majority of their plural wives during this 3-year span, just like Joseph Smith was purported to have married the majority of his plural wives in a 3-year span. So we have no evidence that he had any children with these women, but throughout this time, like, Emma was literally pregnant when he died, so we know he was fertile up to the end. But these men, it shows a little bit of a different story. So let's see. So Brigham Young had 2 children within that 3-year span from his plural wives. One was from Harriet E. Cook. She had a son who was born February 6th, 1846, and then a daughter, Mary Ann Young, who is the daughter of a plural wife, Clarissa Ross, born June 8th, 1847. So Brigham Young had 2 children from his plural wives during this 3-year span. And then Heber had freaking 8 children born by his plural wives during this 3-year span.
Dang.
Parley P. Pratt had 5 children from his wives during this.
And he only has like 4 wives, right? Or
Parley P. Pratt married 4 wives in the first year and then 8 wives
first
total.
year.
Yeah.
Starting in September.
September of 1844.
Crazy.
Like, yeah. Joseph Smith died and he's like, okay, let's get it started, right?
They were like, woo!
I know. For real. It's like literally what happens. Like, and the thing is, it's like, there was nothing that had changed in their environment. They were still in Utah. I mean, were not in Utah. They were still in Nauvoo. All the same things for why Joseph Smith had supposedly kept it secret and why we don't have any evidence. It's like, if anything, you were at the height of the risk for violence at this time because they literally just murdered your prophet and his brother.
Right.
Like, you think that's when you would buckle down and really not practice polygamy because of all the risk and all the need for secrecy at this time.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, we see the opposite behavior with them.
They're like, oh, he's gone. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, that's like the only catalyst. That's the only thing that changed in their circumstances to why we would suddenly see this explosion of marrying so many women is Joseph Smith and Hyrum Smith are gone. And so to me, like, is it so crazy to correlate the fact that maybe Joseph Smith and Hyrum Smith and Emma Smith were all telling the truth when they were publicly denying polygamy and publicly condemning it and publicly saying they were going to try to find the people who were secretly practicing it and end it? Like, is that such a wild belief when they all said that publicly and then we don't see this explosion and all these other people practicing polygamy until right after they die and Emma's power is stripped from her?
Right.
Like, for me, to me, that seems like a smoking gun.
That's so obvious.
Yeah. It's literally like a kid who's eating all the cookies and their hands are in the jar. They're like, no, it wasn't me. You know, it's like, well, you ate all the cookies and we can see that. So you have chocolate on your face.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like so clear to me. So that happened, which was huge. Oh, another thing that's wild is... We'll wrap this up. This is definitely going to have to be 2 episodes because I want to get into Emma Smith and the Relief Society and like what Brigham Young did to all the women in the church because it is crazy.
Yeah.
And I feel like that needs its own space coming from our podcast in particular about females. So, but let me wrap out all this up because this leads into that.
Okay.
So another really interesting thing with, there's this weird thing that suddenly came, like this doctrine that came into existence right after Joseph Smith died, where these guys were like, oh, Joseph Smith, we said we had to marry these women that he used to marry. It is like, it was very much this like Old Testament theological.
That they had to marry women that he married?
Yeah. Like they were widows now. Like and so they needed to take care of the prophet's widows and marry them.
Crazy.
Yes. Isn't that crazy?
Okay.
Yeah. And the craziest thing is there is allegedly people who
But they're not going to take care of Emma at all.
Right. In fact, they're going to screw her life over by putting all the debt on her. But all these widows need to be taken care of, even though Joseph Smith wasn't financially or spiritually or anything supporting them. They're widows now. And so Joseph Smith wanted them to take care of these women. And it wasn't even with all of the women that he was allegedly sealed to. It was just the young women who were capable of bearing children.
Of course.
Who were more desirable. And there's a couple of them who were married to other men.
Oh.
Yeah. Who had
very convenient.
A husband.
Who were already being taken care of?
Yes.
Potentially.
Literally. And so... and this is one of the stories that always made me feel icky when I was first reading about church history was the examples of Joseph Smith being sealed to women who were already married to men. And so there was this one story with Zina D. Huntington that's really icky because how it goes is she was married to a faithful member of the church. She had a husband who she was pregnant with his child. And then Joseph Smith sent her husband on a mission. His name was Henry Jacobs. So he sends him on a mission so he's conveniently away, and then he seals her to himself. And there was even speculation like, oh, was Zina's child actually Joseph Smith's child from like, and this had been an affair type thing that had been going on, or like a plural marriage that had been going on before this. But it was very much like the David Bathsheba story without killing Uriah. You know, it was very much like, let's get rid of her husband and send him on a mission and spiritually manipulate him so I can marry his wife who I want to marry.
Yeah.
So that was the story where I was like, oh, that is hard to swallow, you know?
Yeah.
Like that just gives you the ick. And feels so much like spiritual or religious manipulation. But that's the story. But the interesting thing is that's supposedly what happened. But so Joseph Smith was still married to her when Henry Jacobs came home, and they were still, and Zina did not leave Henry Jacobs. She was still living with her current husband and having a family with him and everything relatively looking normal. But then, after Joseph Smith died, Brigham Young comes along and is like, well, I need to be sealed to you because I need to take care of Joseph Smith's widows. And so he gets married to her, and then immediately she leaves her husband. And so my question is, why, if she was already sealed to another man, if she was already sealed to Joseph Smith, and that didn't cause issues in their marriage, why immediately when she married Brigham Young did that ruin her marriage and she left her husband for Brigham Young?
Yeah, exactly.
I would say, and this happened with several women, like her sister that also happened with. I think her sister married Lucinda. She married Heber C. Kimball. Same thing. She left her husband when previously she hadn't, and she was supposedly sealed to Joseph Smith before that. And then Sarah Ann Whitney is another example where, I mean, there's this whole thing about her marriage, but same thing. She was married to someone. She was sealed to Joseph Smith, and she had this marriage that was fine until he died, and Heber C. Kimball got sealed to her, and then she left her husband for it. So
where are these guys' records and accounts?
I know, right?
That's what I want to know.
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't found any, honestly.
Suspicious.
For real. But I just think that points to, we know Joseph Smith was sealing himself to people. Like, you can't deny that. But I feel like all these things kind of point to the fact that Joseph Smith sealing people was not the same as what these other people were doing when they were sealing. I think what happened was they took a lot of what Joseph Smith was doing and changed it to fit how they wanted the church to run. And it became very much about polygamy and about marriage and starting families with these women and like an actual husband and wife relationship of like sex and all of that, you know, everything that comes with that. I think that's how they changed a lot of these sealings to become. Whereas Joseph Smith, I think he was mostly introducing the idea and kind of exploring it. Like, he sealed himself to like women who obviously like 55-year-old women, things like that. But he also sealed himself to like single men. And he also sealed himself to his friends and his family.
It's more like it's just kind of a concept of the afterlife and like as like families are together forever.
Yeah.
Like how the church believes, you know, we go into certain kingdoms and we'll see our loved ones. But if we're not sealed, then, you know, all that.
Right.
It's more like just exploring that kind of idea.
Yeah, it was more like a exploring of a kinship and a connection to people to last in that afterlife, which is interesting. Like, it's an interesting idea. I don't think it was as solid as it is now of what we think. Like, I don't think Joseph Smith was like, families are forever. I think he was like, we are creating these eternal families and these eternal connections, but the families are forever really came after him when they linked polygamy and like sexual relations and wife and husband relations with like that became linked with sealing. And that's what that turned into. I mean, Brigham Young did also seal himself to men and stuff. He still used that, but it's so different with Brigham Young because he definitely established a hierarchy in Utah. Like, all the men who were sealed to him and all his adopted sons and adopted whatever, like it was definitely within his structure of power and his structure of authority.
It's fucked up.
Yeah, and so he used that. But I think these sealings before that, historians have traditionally looked at being like, oh, they were marriages, you know, because that's what everyone is saying. When looking at it now, it's like, oh no, it was polygamists years later, not contemporary, who are saying those are sealings. And it seems more likely with the evidence and the different behaviors of kind of what we just talked about, that they were two different types of things, and the later people molded it into what they started doing in Utah, and then they put that narrative onto the ceilings before that. That's what I think the evidence points to, just looking at the different behaviors, you know?
Yeah.
And that is such, and we do know, like, we'll do an episode about how records were rewritten, and history was rewritten to fit the current narrative and fit what they needed then. So it's not so hard to think they superimposed what they needed Joseph Smith to be doing back then from their current circumstances. So that's kind of a lot of things I want to go into. But what I really wanted to go into was Emma Smith and Brigham Young and what happened between them and the Relief Society, and what Brigham Young did with the role of women in the church that was so vastly different after Joseph Smith died.
Yeah.
And I feel sad we ran out of time because there's some crazy stories with that. And I think that this in particular is a hidden story that 100% needs to be told in order to understand where we are now as a church and people leaving the church, and like a lot of things that affect us and need to be told for the sake of these powerful women and these powerful people who had way different experiences than we thought they had.
Yeah. Dang, I'm excited.
Me too.
I'm very excited.
Yep.
I'll leave it on a cliffhanger.
Yes, that's what we'll talk about next time.
So much. Next time.
This is the clip from 6 Days in August that pictures Emma Smith and Lucy Mack Smith, Joseph Smith's wife and mother, talking about the finances of the church after Joseph Smith was killed. A couple problematic things to take note of. Number one, they do not show Emma Smith as pregnant at all during this time. In August 1844, she was 5 to 6 months pregnant with Joseph's last child. Why would they omit her pregnancy in a historical retelling of this time period? Why would her pregnancy be unhelpful towards the narrative of Brigham Young's ascension to power in the church?
That's it then. $70,000 in debts.
So that I understand, Brother Clayton, the debts are in the name of my husband, Joseph.
He took on those debts as a private citizen.
You know Joseph saw no difference between private property and property owned by the church.
Our assets, land to house church members, land that Joseph purchased by means of his personal credit. These lands are now in the name of Joseph Smith, trustee and trust for the church.
In other words, everything is owned by the church.
The land belongs to the church, but the debt belongs to me. Mother Smith, where are you going?
To gather all of our food so that they may take that as well. And the chickens. And our milk cow. What else will you take?
And Lucy, you know you will be taken care of.
Mother, sit down. There is a simple solution. A new trustee and trust should be appointed. He can then reconcile what belongs to the church and what is ours.
You would have us appoint a new church president.
President Marks has served as president of the Nauvoo Stake of Zion. I would like to see him nominated as trustee.
You go beyond our authority. We cannot speak for the quorum of the 12. The apostles are on their way back to Nauvoo.
Thank you, George. But I'm not sure we can wait.
I have written to Sidney Rigdon. I've asked him to come.
We shall see. We shall certainly see.
Okay, so a couple thoughts after watching that. Emma's quote-unquote simple solution is to have a new man be appointed to sort out the finances of the church, as if only a man with authority could sort out their family's finances, and she had no specific thoughts or knowledge about what belonged to who. While Emma did want William Marks to take the lead in the church, this is not at all how she handled the situation of her finances. Playing sweet and waiting for the right person in authority to tell her what to do. The undertones of patriarchy are palpable in this scene, and sadly, a historic misrepresentation of Emma's character and her recorded actions in this situation. We had a lot of more thoughts about this scene, but we want to hear from you. Leave your comments below and your thoughts from this very interesting scene.